It was early in the morning when I received the call. My sister, Lily, had gone into labor. I could barely contain my excitement. After months of anticipation, the moment had finally arrived. My heart raced as I gathered my things, ready to rush to the hospital and be by her side. Lily had always been more like a best friend than a sister to me. We'd grown up sharing everything. Secrets, laughter, even tears. Now, she was about to bring a new life into the world, and I couldn't wait to meet my niece or nephew. My husband, Ethan, was still asleep when I slipped out of bed, trying not to wake him. As I walked through the house, I couldn't help but smile. This was supposed to be a joyous day. A new life, a new beginning. It felt like a fresh chapter in our lives, one that would only bring us closer together. Lily had been married to Alex for a few years now, and despite the ups and downs they'd faced, they had both seemed ready for this moment. The pregnancy had been difficult, but Lily was a trooper. She had always been the stronger one between the two of us, never letting anything get in the way of her dreams. I admired that about her. I sent a quick text to Ethan as I grabbed my keys. Lily's in labor. Heading to the hospital. Call you later. I didn't expect a reply, as he was always slow to wake up in the mornings. It didn't matter though. I was too excited to be bothered by it. It wasn't like we had anything urgent to discuss anyway. The hospital was only a short drive away, and as I arrived, I could feel the familiar buzz of nervous energy that seemed to hum through the air. It was a feeling I knew all too well from when I had been pregnant with our son, Ryan. But today wasn't about me, it was about Lily. I parked my car and made my way into the hospital. The sterile smell of antiseptic greeted me as I stepped through the automatic doors, and the bright lights above flickered in the hallway. It was oddly quiet for a place that was filled with so many people. I could see nurses and doctors moving swiftly through the hall, their faces focused and determined. I felt a wave of nervous excitement wash over me. This was happening. My sister was about to become a mother. As I walked through the long, quiet hallway leading to the maternity ward, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in the past few years. Lily and I had always been close, but ever since she got married, things had shifted a bit. We still talked all the time, but there was something about the way her life had evolved that made me feel a little disconnected. Maybe it was just that I was starting to feel the weight of my own life. My own marriage with Ethan, raising Ryan, managing a career, and keeping up with the never-ending demands of everyday life. I was looking forward to spending some quality time with Lily again, even if just for a few hours before she became a mother. I wanted to be there to support her, to remind her that she wasn't alone in this. Being a parent was tough, and I wanted to show her that she had someone who understood, someone who would always have her back. As I neared the maternity ward, I caught sight of Ethan's familiar face standing in the doorway of one of the rooms. I smiled, expecting him to turn and greet me, but when he didn't, my smile faltered. His back was to me, and he seemed to be engrossed in a conversation with someone. I took a step closer, curious, but there was something about the way he stood, something that didn't sit quite right with me. He wasn't alone. A woman, someone I didn't recognize, was standing beside him. She was laughing softly at something Ethan had said. Her face lit up with a smile. Ethan was smiling too, but there was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time, something unfamiliar. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway around me seemed to fade away as I focused entirely on the scene unfolding before me. Ethan and this woman were standing so close to each other, as if they were more than just casual acquaintances. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. What was going on? Why was he so close to her? I thought about walking past them and ignoring the moment, but something held me back. I didn't want to intrude, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I hesitated, caught in a battle between my desire to confront the situation and my need to respect their privacy. It wasn't my place to judge, I told myself. They were just talking. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But as I took another step forward, something in the back of my mind urged me to stop. There was a strange sense of unease swirling inside me. Something didn't feel normal. I stood there in silence for a moment, watching them from the corner of my eye. Ethan's laughter filled the space between us, but it felt distant, like it was coming from someone I didn't know. I could hear the woman's voice too, soft and sweet, but there was an intimacy in it that I hadn't expected. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag as I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. I wanted to turn away, to ignore the situation and go on with my visit to Lily. But I couldn't. Had to know. I took one more step forward, my footsteps almost inaudible on the hospital floor. I was close enough now to hear their conversation more clearly. Ethan said something about the baby, but the words were drowned out by the rising noise in my head. The baby. Why would he be talking to this woman about the baby? And then, without warning, I heard her laugh again. A soft, melodic sound that cut through me like a knife. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. But as I moved closer to the door, something stopped me. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the outline of the woman holding a bundle in her arms. Baby. My breath caught in my throat. Froze. The baby was wrapped in a soft blue blanket, and as she shifted, I caught a glimpse of the little face. My mind raced, trying to process the sight in front of me. My heart skipped a beat. That was not Lily's baby. Confusion flooded me. Why was Ethan with this woman? What was going on? Why hadn't he told me anything about her? My mind spun with 1,000 questions, and I couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. The excitement I had felt earlier was now replaced by a sinking feeling in my chest. I took a step back, my thoughts racing. I couldn't stay here. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. I stood frozen in the hospital hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe. My eyes locked on the scene before me, and my heart seemed to stop. There in that small room stood my husband, Ethan, with another woman. The woman was holding a baby wrapped in a soft blue blanket, clearly the focus of Ethan's attention. The baby's face was hidden, but that didn't matter. The closeness between Ethan and this stranger was enough to send waves of confusion and hurt crashing through me. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall as I tried to steady myself. My heart pounded in my chest, and my vision blurred. The woman's laugh echoed in my ears, a sound that now felt like a betrayal. What was I seeing? Why was Ethan with her? What was going on? I couldn't comprehend it. I had always trusted Ethan. We'd been married for 5 years, and while things hadn't always been perfect, I never imagined he'd do something like this. I had always believed in the strength of our relationship, in the bond we had built together. Yet here I was, standing in the hallway of a hospital, watching my husband stand so intimately close to another woman, one I had never seen before. I wanted to shout, to demand answers right then and there, but my body wouldn't obey. My mind raced as I struggled to make sense of the situation. Why hadn't he told me about this woman? Why hadn't he mentioned her at all? And why was she holding a baby? Baby. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't seen Lily's baby yet, but I knew for certain that this wasn't it. The woman wasn't Lily, and the baby wasn't hers. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp. My head spun with a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, anger, confusion, and disbelief. I wanted to turn around, to flee, but something kept me rooted in place. I had to understand what was going on. I needed answers. I took a few shaky steps closer to the door, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. Through the small crack in the door, I could see Ethan and the woman now sitting together. Ethan was holding the baby in his arms, rocking it gently. His eyes filled with an emotion I had never seen directed at me. There was something tender about the way he looked at that child, something that made my stomach churn with unease. The woman whispered something to him, and he nodded, his gaze still fixed on the baby. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the intimacy between them was unmistakable. There was no mistaking the closeness, the comfort they shared. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just a casual interaction. Ethan and this woman were more than just friends. They were something else. Something I wasn't a part of. Tears began to well up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I didn't know whether to cry out in anger or fall to the floor in sorrow. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, and certainly not with someone I didn't know. I stood there, frozen, the pain of the moment slowly creeping into every corner of my heart. I had always thought our relationship was strong, that we were a team. But this felt like a betrayal on a level I couldn't have anticipated. It felt like a fracture in the foundation of everything I had believed in. And then it hit me, the baby. The baby in the woman's arms. I had always wanted to have a second child with Ethan. We talked about it, dreamed about it, but somehow it had never happened. Work, life, everything had always come in the way. But here was this woman, holding a child that looked so perfect, so innocent, yet the pain of that moment was anything but innocent. How could Ethan have kept this from me? And why had he kept this secret? I wanted to turn and leave. I wanted to escape from this moment, from this reality. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed to confront him. I slowly backed away from the door, my mind racing. What if I was wrong? What if there was some innocent explanation? But deep down I knew there wasn't. I knew what I had seen. The way he held the baby, the way he looked at that woman. There was no mistaking it. I turned and hurried down the hallway, my footsteps heavy against the floor. I was desperate to find some space, some quiet where I could process what I had just witnessed. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. What should I do? Confront him immediately. Wait, how could I even begin to make sense of this? I found a small bench near the waiting area and sat down, my hands shaking as I clasped them together. I tried to steady my breathing, but it was impossible. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions, none of them making sense. What had I missed? Had this been going on for months? Years? How long had Ethan been lying to me? And why hadn't I seen it? Why hadn't I noticed the signs? Was I blind? Or had he been so careful in hiding it all? I looked around the hospital lobby, as if the sterile white walls could somehow offer me the answers I needed. But they didn't. No one could. Not until I confronted Ethan and demanded the truth. I pulled out my phone, my hands unsteady as I typed a message to my best friend, Amanda. I need to talk to you. It's about Ethan. I hit send, hoping that her reply would bring some comfort, some guidance. But deep down, I knew that there was no comforting this kind of pain. There was no easy way to face the truth that my husband, the man I trusted with everything, had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even begin to understand. I needed to talk to him. But before I could process everything, I had to face one simple, undeniable fact. My marriage had changed. Everything had changed. The woman, the baby, the secret. They were all pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I was ready to put together. I couldn't sit still anymore. The moment I had witnessed, the image of Ethan holding the baby, the intimacy shared between him and that woman, replayed over and over in my mind like a loop I couldn't escape. The weight of the discovery crushed me, suffocating me with every passing second. I needed answers. I needed to confront him. I stood up from the bench in the waiting area, my legs shaky as I made my way down the hallway. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each step echoing in the silence of the hospital. The sterile lights above did nothing to ease the tension that coiled inside me. I couldn't avoid this any longer. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine when everything inside me screamed otherwise. The door to the room where I had seen them was still ajar, and through the crack I could see Ethan and the woman sitting together. They were talking quietly, their faces close, and for the briefest moment, I considered turning away. I thought about leaving, about going back to my car, to the life I had known before this moment, but I knew I couldn't. I had to face this. I had to confront him. With a shaky breath, I pushed the door open. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped into the room. Ethan and the woman looked up at the same time. The woman's expression softened, but there was no mistaking the unease in Ethan's eyes when he saw me standing there, my face a mixture of disbelief and anger. For a moment no one spoke. The air between us felt thick, like a storm was brewing. I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands trembling at my sides. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words seemed stuck in my throat. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. His voice was shaky, his eyes wide with surprise. "Sarah!" He stood up quickly, his face pale, as if he had been caught in the act. "I didn't expect you here so soon." I stared at him, unable to form coherent words. The baby in the woman's arms looked so small, so innocent, but it only deepened the ache in my chest. Why had he kept this from me? Why hadn't he told me? I swallowed hard, my voice shaking with the raw emotion building inside me. "Who is she, Ethan?" The words were forced out, but they were heavy with the weight of everything I had seen. "And why didn't you tell me about her? Why didn't you tell me about the baby?" Ethan looked down, his face a mixture of guilt and something else I couldn't place. The woman, who had been holding the baby so protectively, stood up slowly, her eyes darting between the two of us, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. "This is Rachel," Ethan finally said, his voice low. "And this is our son." The words hit me like a slap in the face. "Our son." The room felt as if it were spinning around me, the reality of the situation crashing into me with the force of 1,000 emotions. Could hardly breathe. I had been prepared for something, an affair, maybe a secret, but this was too much. My mind couldn't process it. "Our son." "Your son," I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. My chest tightened and I felt like I was suffocating. "How long has this been going on, Ethan? How long have you been keeping this from me?" Ethan lowered his gaze, clearly ashamed. I didn't know how to tell you, Sarah. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Rachel and I." He hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "We've been seeing each other for a while. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." I shook my head, trying to understand what he was saying. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated, incredulous. "You've been having an affair with this woman, Ethan. And you've been keeping a child from me. From us. How could you do this?" Rachel stepped forward, her eyes filled with sympathy, but I wasn't sure I could bear to look at her. The anger that had been building inside me was beginning to surge. It was too much. Too much to absorb, too much to accept. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for things to get this complicated. But Ethan and we're a family now. And I think it's time you knew the truth." The words stung, each one a sharp reminder of the betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the secrets, the life they had been building behind my back. I could feel tears welling in my eyes, but I fought them back, refusing to let them fall. I wouldn't cry in front of them. Not yet. I couldn't show them that weakness. Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching out to me, but I stepped back, instinctively recoiling from his touch. I couldn't bear to be near him right now. The man I had trusted, the man I had given my heart to, was now standing in front of me, guilt written all over his face, but no true remorse. There was no apology that could undo the damage he had done. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way," he said again, his voice strained. "But I didn't know how to tell you, Sarah. I didn't know how to tell you about Rachel and the baby. It was never supposed to go this far. I was trying to protect you, but now I see that was a mistake. I should have been honest with you." The anger in me flared, and for the first time I finally found the words. "Protect me. From what, Ethan?" "From the truth. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and now you want to act like you were trying to protect me. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. You've destroyed everything we had." Rachel stepped back, her face a mixture of sadness and understanding. I didn't have the energy to feel sorry for her. She was part of this, whether she wanted to be or not. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "But I can't change what's happened. I can't take back the mistakes I've made. But I want to fix this if you'll let me. I want to make things right." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and empty. How could he think he could just fix this? How could he expect me to forgive him? There was no fixing this. The foundation of everything we had built together was cracked, broken beyond repair. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart aching with every step. Ethan's voice followed me, desperate and pleading. "Sarah, please. We can work this out. We can fix this, I swear." But I didn't turn around. Couldn't. The pain was too much. I needed to get away from this, from him, from the life I thought I knew. I walked down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last, until I reached the exit. I stepped outside into the cool air, the silence outside a stark contrast to the storm raging in my heart. I needed space. I needed time. But most of all, I needed to think. I couldn't stay in this marriage. Not with all the lies, not with the betrayal. But I wasn't sure where to go from here. Everything was shattered, and I wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. The days that followed the confrontation were a blur. It felt like I was walking through life with my mind in a fog, the weight of the events pressing down on me at every turn. Ethan had tried to reach out countless times, his calls and messages flooding my phone, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I couldn't bear to hear his voice, to listen to his apologies that felt empty and hollow. I stayed at my sister Lily's house for the first few nights. She had been supportive, though she didn't fully understand what I was going through. How could anyone really? No one could know the depth of the pain I was feeling, the betrayal, the heartache, the sheer disbelief that the man I had loved and trusted had been living a lie for so long. I tried to keep my mind occupied with small tasks, but everything felt insignificant. I went through the motions, but nothing seemed to matter. It was as though the world around me was continuing on without me, and I was stuck in a standstill, unable to move forward. Lily, as always, was kind and patient, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew I was struggling, but she didn't know how to help. No one did. Not even I knew how to help myself. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Lily said one night as we sat on the couch, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. "I wish I knew what to say, but I don't." I looked at her, forcing a small smile. "I don't need you to say anything, Lil. I just need time." But time wasn't helping. It felt like the more time passed, the worse it got. The memories of Ethan, the sound of his laugh, the way he held me when I was upset, the way he had promised me we'd always be a team, kept replaying in my mind, haunting me. I tried to focus on work, but it was difficult. Every time I saw a couple together, every time I saw a happy family, the pang in my chest grew deeper. I was broken. And no matter how hard I tried to piece myself back together, it felt impossible. The worst part of it all wasn't just that Ethan had cheated on me. It was the lies, the manipulation, the way he had kept a whole other family hidden from me for so long. And the baby. The innocent child who had been caught in the middle of it all. I had to admit it. I was angry. So much anger bubbled inside me that I didn't know how to contain it. How could he do this to me? How could he look me in the eye for years and tell me he loved me, all while carrying on an affair and having a child with another woman? I remembered the day he had told me that he wanted to fix things. How could I even begin to fix something this broken? How could I trust him again? There was no going back. The damage was too great. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult morning at work, I found myself standing in front of a small coffee shop, unsure of where to go next. I had been walking for what felt like hours, trying to clear my head, but nothing seemed to help. It was then that I saw him, Ethan, standing across the street, looking lost. He wasn't looking at me, but I knew he saw me. My heart skipped a beat, but the anger rose up again, sharp and hot, pushing out any trace of tenderness I once had for him. I didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear him tell me that everything could be fixed. I knew better now. Nothing would ever be the same. But as I stood frozen, watching him from a distance, I realized something. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to forgive him, or if I wanted to move on entirely. I didn't know what my future looked like, and that uncertainty terrified me. For the first time since all of this began, I made a decision. I would not stay in a relationship based on lies. I would not let this define me. I couldn't let Ethan's mistakes control my life. But what did that mean? What would life look like without him? The questions were endless, and the answers felt far out of reach. I turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, still unaware that I had seen him. I didn't need to confront him anymore. I didn't need to hear him apologize or beg for my forgiveness. I needed to focus on myself, on healing, and on finding a path forward no matter how difficult that might be. Over the next few weeks, I began to slowly rebuild my life. I reached out to my friends and family, leaning on them for support. I started to focus on my work again, pushing through the pain to find some sense of normalcy. I even started seeing a therapist, hoping to process the emotions that had been swirling inside me for so long. There were moments when I missed Ethan, when I wondered what could have been if things had been different. But those moments grew fewer and fewer. I wasn't the woman who had trusted him blindly anymore. I wasn't the woman who had believed in the future we had talked about. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had learned to take control of her life, even in the face of betrayal. As time passed, I began to understand something crucial. I couldn't let my past define me. I couldn't let Ethan's actions take away my power. My future was in my hands, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I would walk it on my own terms. The world was no longer a place of black and white certainty. The colors had faded, blurred into various shades of gray that I could neither escape nor ignore. But strangely, I found myself accepting it. The anger, the pain, the confusion, while they hadn't fully disappeared, they had softened. Time, though painful, had allowed me to see things more clearly. And it was through this clarity that I began to realize something powerful. I didn't need Ethan to define me. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was learning to stand on my own. It wasn't easy, though. Each day was a battle against the memories that crept up when I least expected them. On certain quiet nights, the loneliness would settle in like a heavy fog, and I would find myself reaching for the phone, wishing I could call Ethan just to hear his voice, even if it was only to say that he was sorry. But I didn't. I refused. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my present, and I certainly wasn't going to let it steal my future. Work became my sanctuary, my distraction. The hospital, with its sterile walls and constant hum of activity, offered me a rhythm to cling to. I threw myself into my duties, volunteering for extra shifts, working late into the night when the world outside felt too quiet. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it gave me something to focus on, something to prove to myself that I still had purpose. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stay in this cycle forever. I had to face the truth of what had happened, and I had to learn to let go of the things I couldn't control. One afternoon, while I was cleaning out my email inbox, I found an email from an old acquaintance, a woman named Claire. She had been a mentor of mine when I first started working in the hospital, and though we had lost touch over the years, her name brought a sense of comfort. The email was brief, simply inviting me to coffee. It was strange. Why had she reached out now? But something inside me urged me to say yes. I agreed to meet her the following week, and as I stepped into the small cafe that Claire had suggested, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. I had no idea what to expect, but I trusted her. She had always been a source of wisdom in my life, and I knew that I could use someone to talk to, someone who had walked a similar path before. Claire greeted me with a warm smile, her familiar presence immediately putting me at ease. We sat down at a small table in the corner, and she wasted no time getting to the heart of things. "Sarah," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "I know you've been through a lot, and I'm so sorry for what you've had to endure. But I also know that you're stronger than you realize." I met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while I felt something shift inside me. It was as if the weight I had been carrying was starting to lighten. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," I confessed, my voice shaky. "Everything feels so uncertain. I'm not sure who I am without Ethan, without the life I thought I had. I don't know what to do next." Claire took a deep breath, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "It's normal to feel that way, Sarah. You're grieving and it's a process. But let me ask you this. What do you want for yourself? What is it that makes you feel alive?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? What had I always wanted? I thought about it for a moment. It wasn't an easy question to answer, especially not in the wake of everything that had happened. But somewhere deep inside I knew the answer. I want peace, I said quietly. I want to be happy again on my own. I want to find joy in my own life, without needing someone else to fill the void. Claire smiled, her eyes full of understanding. That's the first step, Sarah. You've already made the decision whether you realize it or not. The journey to healing isn't about fixing the past. It's about moving forward with the lessons you've learned. I nodded, her words settling into my heart like seeds being planted in fertile soil. It wasn't going to be easy, but I could do this. I could rebuild my life piece by piece with my own hands. And I would do it for myself. The next few weeks were filled with small changes. I started taking yoga classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I began journaling again, pouring my thoughts onto paper as a way of processing everything that had happened. I reconnected with old friends, people I had distanced myself from in the past. Slowly, my world began to feel more vibrant, more alive. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One afternoon, while I was walking in the park, I caught sight of something that made me pause. A young couple, holding hands, laughing together. It was a small moment, but it filled me with something unexpected. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find love again someday. Maybe I could trust someone again. But for now, I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough on my own. And that realization that I was enough was the most freeing feeling I had ever experienced. As the months passed, I found myself growing stronger. The sharp pain of betrayal had dulled into something more manageable, something that no longer controlled my every thought and action. I began to trust myself again, to believe in my own worth. And then one evening, Ethan reached out to me once more. He had sent me a letter, something I hadn't expected. But instead of feeling a rush of anger or sadness, I felt a quiet sense of calm. It was his final attempt to apologize, to explain himself. But I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had already let go. I didn't need him to give me closure. I had given it to myself. I never responded to the letter, and that was okay. It was time to let go of the past and fully embrace the future. Months turned into a year, and I stood at a new crossroads. I had healed in ways I hadn't expected, finding strength in my own resilience. There was no grand, sweeping moment of transformation, no magical resolution. It was all small steps, one after another. But each step had led me to a place I could finally call my own. And I was ready for whatever came next.